The morning of 11/25/2012. In my dream began just after I was awakened from sleep. As I was getting out of bed, my attention was drawn to the window where I could see a man getting out of a black car. He straightaway walked to my window and began peering inside. I ran to tell my husband, who was in one of the other rooms. This was not our home, but I thought of it as if it were, but it was a mobile home, like in a trailer park. When I got to my husband, he was reclining back as if he were laying on a bed or against the back of a couch or a chair. I couldn't tell which. As I told him all about the man who was looking at me through the window, on closer observance, I was startled to see that my husband was moving very slowly, as if he were drugged, trying but unable to move with the required speed to help me. By this time, the man was heading toward me down the hallway from the bedroom. I began pleading with my husband for help, but he could hardly move, as if he was partially paralyzed, moving very slowly or almost not at all. My fear intensely increased. As the man got closer, I could see that he was a very large man, and he was approaching me with great power and rage. I cried out. What I said I do not know. All I know is the intruder could not even touch me. In the next scene, my husband and I were driving on a street where I grew up. This was 7 hours from our home, so I remember feeling like we had traveled a long distance and we were almost home, as if I was trying to get back home, but to where I lived when I was a child. Looking in the rearview mirror, I noticed that the man was driving behind us. Alarmed and feeling very afraid, I made several calls for help from my cell phone to report this man who had broken into our home earlier and was now pursuing us. I made several calls out for help but couldn't get anyone to respond with an attitude of urgency to my calls. By this time, the man was gaining on us, so I thought of my other options and questioned myself if I should go to a hospital, but ruled that out since there had been no physical crime or attack. My husband and I began knocking on the door of a nearby house. Frantic, we let ourselves inside without being invited in, where we were greeted by a very large and excited but friendly dog. A somewhat frail woman entered the room from the left, from a dark hallway with little to no caution, almost as if she was expecting me. I remember thinking, maybe the house had a landline, and with the landline I could get through to the officials for some help. So I asked to use her house phone after telling her all about what had happened thus far. She offered the only phone she had, which was another cell phone, of which I called out for help to outside sources again and again, and failed again and again, as I had before from the car and on my cell phone. I remember glancing over as I was making the calls for help to see the woman and some other people, including my husband, looking at me from across the room, as if huddled together and talking amongst themselves. I'm not sure, but it seemed in my knowing, or I could hear them discussing my making all these calls, and their determinations amongst themselves was that there was no real risk, or as if this was just a regular part of everyday life. From that part of the dream, the next thing I am in an office building. I think it was a doctor's office. The beginning of this part of the dream is foggy, but next thing I recall was being in a small room with a safe and a young woman who seemed to do whatever I asked of her without excuse, question, or complaint, as if she was ordered to act upon my command. The young woman and I talked some more, I don't remember what about, but then she told me that something I was looking for was in the safe, as if it was something I had lost or lost sight of. I questioned her about it, asking how could something of mine be in this safe, but I finally agreed to see it. I waited for her to open the safe, but she just stood there doing nothing, so I prompted her to go ahead and open the safe. She replied very nonchalantly and as a matter of fact like, "The safe is open to you." I looked inside the safe, rummaging through a few papers and packages and other things to a small box. With a quick and disappointing glance inside the box, I saw some canning jar lids and a few other things of no particular interest to me. Not at that moment anyway. Well, yesterday, November 24th, I had thrown away a box of canning jar lids, the rings, the flat rings, that we found near some mouse droppings while we were cleaning up a storage room to make a place for an indoor herb garden for my mother-in-law. So I tossed that out yesterday, and now for some reason this appears in my dream. I argued to the young woman that I was certain these were not my things. However, she convinced me to take a closer look anyway. At that time, the young woman and I appeared in another room, almost like an outdoor room or sunroom or a porch with the outdoors all around us, and it was sunny and bright and beautiful. As I continue to reflect on this unusually vivid dream, I remember that just a little while earlier when I was in the car, it was very gray and dreary outside like it usually is before or after a violent storm has passed. I also remember at this point that the road we were driving on was empty of other cars besides ours and the man that was following us. I looked again at the items in the canning jar lid box, convinced that none of these items belonged to me, until upon further inspection I had immediate recognition of the content in great detail. When I did look deeper still, I could see on the inside part of the lid several different scenes. I was stunned and alerted when I saw these scenes, as they were of things that were important to me, as if they were people and places that held very dear to memories for me. It was then that it was revealed that this box held a collection of blessings that God had given me. Though I convinced the young woman that I was sure the lids and other stuff were not mine, but must have belonged to someone else, I gave them back to her, telling her to put them back into the safe should someone come looking for them. She did as I asked. However, I had confirmed for her that the content inside the box was for me and told me exactly what I needed to help me, and it was this: that whenever I need help or should I be afraid, I must call on God first. This brings me to Philippians 4:6, which I will share later. The next scene in my dream was of myself and the young woman going into a room where the only place to sit was on a toilet. Okay, it had a lid, but that's what it was. Once inside the small room, there was hardly any room for the young woman, but I asked her to come in, and she did. I also requested that the young woman shut the door. However, she paused for a moment to look out with much concern on her face at the group of people that had gathered in an outer room, some of which were at the house where I had used the frail woman's cell phone. It was then that the young woman assured me, "It is good to keep the door open." It was there that I made my thanks known to her, even though my words seemed to not even faze her in the least. I continued nonetheless to say that after so many people could not, would not, or didn't know how or even have the ability to help me, she did. I left her presence with the assurance that she did a good job. The next scene, the young woman was standing at the end of another long hallway, as if in waiting to see me off. She stayed right there and did nothing when the very large and powerful man who had earlier pursued me But this time there was with him a smaller man, and they both forcefully grabbed me and began to take me away. The young woman, still standing at the end of the hallway, did or said nothing. At that moment I thought it or yelled it out, I don't recall which one. "What? Not again!" And then I remembered what I had received from the safe. The dream ended immediately when I called to God. Adonai, I lift up my heart.